The first season of this show was an adaptation nightmare, so going into the second, we all knew what to expect.
It's just so sad.
This video will primarily focus on how the creators adapt the story of Book 2 in extremely flawed ways by going in depth on 4 specific issues. Most of the flaws from the first season carry over to this one, and that's why I want to focus on adaptation. Like, the dialogue is still truly terrible.
Hey, you guys okay?
We're going too fast, and it's too high. I'm just a kid.
I'm Toth Bayfall, and I invented metal bending.
Bending's my middle name.
I think the best start for this analysis is to establish a baseline by looking at how incohesive and odd the opening of Season 2 is. We begin with the refugees of Omashu fleeing the Fire Nation, which right away, an entire episode basically just happened off screen. Aang and the gang had to originally save these people. So without that context, most viewers probably don't remember who these people are. Then, spontaneously, Team Avatar finds them and saves them. This immediately raises 2 questions of, how did these people escape, and how did Aang find these refugees? The writers choose to not answer those questions, and we essentially start here because we need a retention action scene just like the first season, or else viewers will get bored and click away. A funny anecdote here as well is Sokka 1v4ing Fire Nation soldiers and winning, without them, you know, firebending? Another major change here is Suki arriving to also help save the day, making the scene even more confusing where she wasn't with the refugees and also happened to show up in this forest. As if the writers set up a plot beacon and any characters within a 100-mile radius showed up. Oh yeah, and by the way, there was casually a multi-year time jump between seasons, insinuating that Omashu fell 2 years ago. The show implies with these refugees running away that Season 2 picks up right after the first one. So within the very first scene, this is already a confusing mess as the plot resembles a discombobulated bowl of spaghetti. Additionally, a major beginning point in the animated series is seeing Aang try to find and free his possible future earthbending teacher, King Bumi. They have to infiltrate Omashu and fight through a tough confrontation with Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee. Bumi is also under rigorous guard, so escaping with him comes at great difficulty. So the twist where Bumi is willingly remaining as a prisoner comes as a great surprise. Whereas in the live action, Sai the Mechanist knows exactly where they're keeping Bumi, somehow, and Aang just flies into the building and effortlessly knocks out the guards and gets the keys to Bumi's cell, pretty much removing all conflict from this plot point so Aang can immediately learn about neutral Jing. This part of the story is so frustratingly cut down to the point that why even bother adapting this portion? Have him learn about neutral Jing when he comes across the blind bandit or something. It's such a disservice to the animated series. Then the breaking point for this episode really comes when we get to Serpent's Pass. For context, Serpent's Pass is episode 12 of Book 2, and that episode serves 3 main functions that are entirely missing in the live action, which are, putting Team Avatar through this obstacle emphasizes the added difficulty of traveling without Appa. They're taking this path because they need to save as much time as possible. Sozin's Comet is set up after this, by the way, and using this dangerous pass gets them to Ba Sing Se. The show has us go through this just because. Not to mention that we have Appa so he could ferry people across. If anything, it'd actually be faster that way since the pass is much smaller in the show. Why risk the lives of these refugees by going through this perilous path? This isn't even touching on the serpent yet, but for that, how do these refugees not know about this location? We're like a day away from Omashu. This should be a pretty revered location for locals that tell outsiders to stay away from this location. How is this giant serpent a mystery? So, trying to understand adapting Serpent's Pass here and in this way is a fool's errand. It seems like Netflix wants a flashy, big CGI fight to open with, in the hopes that they can falsely wow the audience with spectacle and distract them away from realizing that the plot has less depth than an elementary school play. And the craziest thing here is, the Serpent's Pass is genuinely something that could have been cut. I'd much rather they adapt other plotlines that have more story significance, like having a proper episode in the desert with the library. Or hell, if you really want to throw money at a set piece, then why not adapt The Drill? They're cutting out one of the best and most climactic episodes seemingly because they can't realistically open with it, or maybe they didn't have enough money. An episode, by the way, that establishes the dire stakes that Ba Sing Se is very much not safe. They were on the precipice of being breached and were lucky that Aang arrived during the assault. Cutting this out removes the urgency from the Ba Sing Se plot, and it also acts to rile up the characters when they're shut down from talking about the war that's literally knocking on their door. This is going a little off topic since I'm trying to focus on the opening for this segment, but in terms of budget allocation, everyone would rather this money go towards something that's way more consequential towards the story than something that wasn't that important, and even then, the aspects that gave the Serpent's Pass its meaning were removed. Going into the next crazy issue of Adaptation that coincidentally takes place in the next episode, we have the creators smashing together multiple plot lines into one. The second episode, no joke, adapts 3 different significant episodes into one with segments from 2 other episodes. The 3 main episodes are Zuko Alone, The Chase, The Blind Bandit, and then we're also combining parts like the brief romantic tease with the family that takes in Iroh and Zuko, and Azula meeting Zuko and trying to bring him back in. Season 1 would sometimes combine together episodes, but never portions of the story with this level of density. This gets to a point where you can't do any of these plotlines justice. Like, starting with Zuko Alone, the efficacy of that episode derives from the betrayal of learning that Zuko is a firebender. He's giving up this image of being a hero to save a child. The climax is the selling point. In the show, we mostly have some romance here, which does work in the sense that these actors sell this really well, and the loss would now be watching this potential bond of love burn away. However, since we're subbing out the climax of Zuko Alone with the chase's endpoint, Zuko's betrayal is an afterthought. All the focus narratively is elsewhere. There's really no impact or emotional toll from revealing himself. Writing-wise, this is actually very easy to fix where you can have a quick confrontation with the Earthbenders before this climax. Have it happen at the farm where Zuko is forced to reveal his firebending when the Earthbenders threaten to hurt his new love interest. Now, you have an actual interaction between Zuko and Faye. There's an emotional connection that severs here as she rejects Zuko, drastically increasing the quality, and this puts Zuko into a better, more volatile state to pursue Aang. While staying on the subject of Zuko, let's also look at his dialogue scene with Azula because placing this manipulative scene from the beginning of Book 2 simply doesn't work here. As context, Azula tries to lure Zuko into a trap, and the violent hostility they have towards each other for the rest of the season comes from this moment, leading to where, in the animated show, the Chase's 3-way fight scene is a free-for-all from the get-go. The live action combines these 2 scenes without it actually making sense, because since Aang is present here, Azula would definitely value trying to capture or kill the Avatar over dealing with Zuko. That's by far the biggest priority. This would inherently alter the fight where, within this new context, Azula and Zuko don't have a reason to fight each other now. Or Azula would realistically double-cross Zuko after the Avatar is dealt with, which could then give Aang an opportunity to escape or fight back, exploiting the weakness between these 2 characters. So the creators are simply forcing this free-for-all to happen without really understanding why it happens. Then, looking at The Blind Bandit, the second other main episode thrown in here as if this is a cursed bowl of ramen noodles, we essentially get like 3 to 4 scenes from that episode, and things are condensed so much that we lose some of its best segments. One of those being the evolution of Toph changing her mind and becoming Aang's teacher. In the live action, she joins the crew because her motivation is that she just wants to fight people. She shows up to the ultimate showdown as if this is an Avengers movie, giddy at the prospect of fighting firebenders, as if that's not simply implied by hanging out with the Avatar. This completely waters down and borderline butchers her reason for joining the team. In the animated show, Toph is put in a position where she has to reveal her powers while her parents are present to save Aang. a major choice with a big consequence. She chooses the heroic action of saving Aang's life at the cost of revealing her secrets. Toph from here doesn't choose to join Team Avatar. She tries to go back to her normal life with the status quo now changed, but she's looking for acceptance from her parents, who ultimately reject this life Toph has been living, and thus by extension, her true self. It's a gutting, vulnerable moment for Toph, and it even gets worse where they choose to punish her. She feels utterly rejected and decides to run away and join Aang. It's a decision that's deeply tied to her character and operates as a great foundation of finding a place of acceptance because this is her new inherited family. While the show is action go brr. They do staple on the confrontation she has with her mother, where she wanders into the set after the climactic fight. However, Toph has already made up her mind at this point. We're removing the depth, and the scene now basically plays as a more stereotypical moment of a teenager telling off their mother that they don't understand them. Then, since we're haphazardly combining multiple episodes, that means we're stitching everything together with flimsy coincidences to drive the plot. Examples being the Beifong family inviting Aang and him getting lucky that he spontaneously runs into the blind bandit after just watching her 5 minutes prior, instead of them figuring that out organically. Azula's entourage is seemingly walking through a forest and they happen upon Appa's trail. Zuko's even in this town and also runs into Azula right before he tries to fight Aang. And then literally every character spontaneously shows up in this courtyard in the span of like 3 minutes after the fight starts. Then don't even get me started on how devoid of logic this sequence is. Like, where are the guards in this town? So, unfortunately, episode 2 isn't the only example of smashing together a bunch of plotlines because the last half of the Ba Sing Se plot simultaneously adapts the Lake Laogai arc and the Azula infiltration arc. Although, before diving into that shitfest, I think we should first analyze how Ba Sing Se as a whole was adapted this season, where the creators rush as fast as possible to get to Ba Sing Se, especially in comparison to the animated show where we don't enter the city until episode 14 out of 20, cutting out or repurposing most of what made season 2 of the animated show so iconic. It actually felt like a wide, sprawling, and fun adventure, with diverse locations that also acted as world building. Like, despite the swamp not being a crucial episode, it was still an interesting location to explore. The live action, on the other hand, feels more like it's primarily the Ba Sing Se show, where the pace is breakneck and once we get to the city, we halt the pace and spend a lot of time here, adapting certain portions of the story that I thought would have been condensed or cut out entirely. Going into some examples, we spend almost a whole episode at the royal party where, funnily enough, they remove the whole obstacle of trying to infiltrate the palace and we're just invited in. So it turns the set piece into a rather mundane event where our characters simply meander around for a half hour. Along with the only objective being trying to talk to the Earth King, so it didn't warrant that much screen time to begin with. The Tales of Ba Sing Se, where every character has their own mini side story, was kept and was basically its own episode, which, to be fair, keeping Iroh's segment is essential, and I don't dislike these scenes by any means, but with 7 episodes, your time is very precious, making it questionable if you should be adapting this over other portions of the story. Then on top of that, we're also adding in new developments like the conflict surrounding the firebending refugees, and not only are we basically stretching out every minor aspect of the story here, we're also taking the Painted Lady out of season 3 and putting it in here, which does have some narrative synergy with the Blue Spirit, but all of this comes at the cost of ironically not properly adapting the best parts of Ba Sing Se: the drill, Lake Laogai, and the false Suki warriors. To me, this gives off the unshakable feeling that the creators had to be as budget conscious as possible, adapting things that cost very little to produce, like trying to get as much mileage out of the sets built for Ba Sing Se, and since so much of the season is spent here, that now also means we're not traveling to different exotic locations, cutting down on fees, and Appa is also barely in this season, lowering the burden for CGI a bit, and I find this ironic in that if Appa wasn't going to be on screen that much, then why not adapt the desert properly before going into Ba Sing Se? You can easily trim out an episode's worth of content in the city, and that wouldn't even be necessary considering that the library was already shifted to this location. So, as a whole, it seems like the first 2 episodes burned through most of their budget, and the fact that they already have 7 episodes this season indicates that the budget from the onset was probably tight.
Here's your budget.
Mr. Krabs, I ain't gonna stretch this dollar until it begs for mercy.
No one in their right mind would actively choose less episodes in trying to adapt Book 2 of Avatar. So with that, let's now turn our attention back to the chaos of compressing Lake Laogai and Azula's infiltration into one ridiculous arc. The primary main change here that flat out breaks this plotline is Azula turning herself in. This is a crazy reversal from the animated show, where when Azula shows up, Longfeng is in prison. She sees him as a powerful asset she can use because the Dai Li were so loyal to him. So her plan was to release Longfeng, initiate a coup, and eventually betray Longfeng, thus taking over the remaining power in the city. In the live action, Azula surrenders all of her opening leverage.
We're walking straight into a prison.
What? No. What kind of maniac would do that?
She turns herself in with the hopes that Longfeng will work together with her, which is so laughably stupid, and let's try to understand this for a second. Azula offers Longfeng information of the generals who are against him, hoping that by giving him these names, he'll release her from jail and work together in seizing Ba Sing Se. Immediately, there are 2 blatantly obvious problems here. The main one being, what's to stop Longfeng from keeping Azula in prison? She already gave up the names and he has no reason to let her out now. Doing so would drastically increase the odds of her double-crossing him. That should be all but a certainty with a character as conniving and devious as Azula. This would be like Varys implicitly trusting Littlefinger.
I would never put the security of this city at risk.
What a dumbass. Then the second problem with Azula labeling generals as traitors is, this should be attainable information that Longfeng already has. He has a vast spy network. This would be like Tyrion walking up to Varys, trying to sell him secrets that he already knows. So it's really ironic and backwards that Azula somehow knows this and not Longfeng. And to dumb his character down even more, he never even suspects that maybe Azula is trying to lie to him, sowing distrust amongst the generals before the Fire Nation attacks. He implicitly trusts her on her word, and 1 episode later, he takes her to the generals that she subsequently kills.
I've changed my mind about our deal.
I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
Thank you for spelling it out for the brainlets in the back. So yeah, obviously Longfeng trusting Azula here is insane, and completely reverses this plot point at the detriment of the story's logic getting obliterated. Maybe you can lean more into the aspect of Azula sparing the city of a devastating assault by letting her take control, but the issue with that is, Longfeng has a massive bargaining chip now. Azula is the heir to the throne. Zuko is in exile. Either the Fire Nation's position is significantly weaker given that Azula can no longer help them, so they're more likely to fail, or just simply go the route of threatening to kill Azula if they attack. This point is also so disingenuous because Longfeng doubts in the ability of the Avatar being able to turn the tide of war. This is especially annoying because that's what happens in the animated series. Aang shows up and saves the city. If anything now, Ba Sing Se is the most secure it's ever been. So Longfeng not even having any hope that they can win the war and turns the keys over to Azula is extremely disappointing. And this isn't even out of his own selfish gain, like he was genuinely dumbstruck when Azula betrayed him. So shockingly, this is only 1 plot point so far, and there are other issues that make this even messier or push it further down the illogical rabbit hole. Another ridiculous one when you actually think about it is Aang lying down on the ground and being able to hear Appa. Even if you were to go off the very generous assumption that Aang had this type of mastery of his senses, the end of episode 6 implies that Appa is right underneath Aang. But that's not the case. Aang ends up having to travel outside of the city to access the jail that is holding his friends and Appa. Straight up just impossible to send something like that miles away. Then some other silly points are luring both Katara and Zuko to the same location with a screaming girl acting as a decoy, even though the city is massive and the chances of both of them being within earshot would be really low. They don't even take away Katara's water despite her being a waterbender while in jail. And funnily enough here, they used water during the drill episode to pierce through thick metal beams. So the overpowered Katara should surely be able to saw through this thin metal gate. And then everyone blowing up their relationships essentially just serves the plot in the sense that they can conveniently get captured individually. Oh, and they have to quickly extract Toph out of the final episode to learn metal bending in 5 seconds.
I'm the greatest earthbender in the world!
And then rush back to the main plot. All of this is to point out how, throughout the DNA strands of this entire plotline, different issues, big and small, are cropping up by not faithfully adapting these two arcs separately. The ending is at least okay, we just had to hack the narrative into a disfigured mess to actually get here. For the last general segment of this video, let's assess each main character, some longer than others, to see how inferior their arcs are in comparison to the animated show. For Aang in Season 2, there are 3 problems with him. 1, and this is kind of similar to the first season, he very much does not resemble the optimistic child he should be. He's kind of become a different, more mature person, maybe because they did a time jump between seasons, and because of this, he's so far detached from his animated counterpart. There were genuinely some moments, like his reaction to the refugees slowing him down through the Serpent's Pass, where he seems annoyed and bothered. He's very sour and moody, and this general state would make sense if they actually adapted the point of losing Appa. This is leading into the second problem, where Appa's loss deeply changes Aang. It marks a dark moment in the show where Aang becomes angrier and lashes out. This has a resounding impact because, by contrast, Aang was so full of life and happy all the time. When this happens in the live action, you have nowhere near the same level of reaction or sympathy towards his character because the degree of change isn't as severe. He's just more bothered than usual. Along with what we brought up earlier, where Appa wasn't really on screen that much anyways, so his loss isn't really felt. And plot-wise, Appa's loss doesn't physically hinder them because they're not actively traveling. Which, outside of character emotion in the animated series, losing Appa while in the middle of the desert spikes in a massive degree of fear. How are these characters going to get out of this location? And moving past the desert, Team Avatar is forced to change and acclimate to a life that doesn't have the ease of jetting across the continent. It's a humbling experience that introduces more conflict into their journey. The live action, of course, doesn't have that at all, and Appa's only gone for an episode and a half. Then the last problem with Aang is the creators cut out some major lessons Aang learns. Notably, the biggest omission is the Guru, and I'll primarily focus on this because this was a gutting removal. Here, Aang is told he'll be able to control the Avatar state by unlocking his chakras. This acts as a captivating gauntlet where unlocking each chakra requires Aang to overcome an internal challenge. Like conquering his fears, letting go of his guilt, and his biggest point of struggle is letting go of his main attachment, his love for Katara. This brings a devastating choice onto Aang where he has to choose between love or power, challenging Aang deeply because his primary objective is mastering his abilities to defeat Fire Lord Ozai. However, for the live action, this choice is entirely absent, removing a considerable amount of depth for Aang's character. To make this even more perplexing, the creators have been setting up this season that Aang has a crush on Katara. The main payoff of that buildup was Aang choosing love in the end. Even Iroh in the animated show commends Aang for making this choice as actually being the wiser move. It's kind of one of the core themes of the show. What's the point in pursuing power if you have to neglect the niceties of life? Power is ever-consuming. Aang has to come to terms with this, and since he can't master the Avatar state, it makes overcoming his main obstacles more challenging, while also making him a more interesting character that's deeply questioning himself. So to me, not adapting the Guru is a major misfire, and you don't even need to go to the air temples. If we're importing the library into Ba Sing Se, then surely the Guru can also show up in the city. Zuko. I've already touched on Zuko alone, but I think an even bigger issue with this character is how the creators handle his metamorphosis. The way it happens in the live action is so sudden and indirectly cuts out one of Zuko's best scenes that also contains Iroh, which is their confrontation when Zuko plans to use Appa as bait.
I'm begging you, Prince Zuko. It's time for you to look inward and begin asking yourself the big questions.
The scene hits so hard because up until this point, Uncle Iroh was a soft and nurturing character. He was patient with Zuko, was always happy, and having the sudden shift where he's yelling at Zuko defines a clear and dire breaking point, illustrating the hard love a parent gives their child so they change and thus evolve into their better self. It's an outstanding scene, and again, since Lake Laogai was combined with other plotlines, that means we couldn't have this scene. Zuko needed to be paired with Katara so he could flow into his endpoint. Skipping this outstanding dialogue scene where the creators substitute this integral moment, with Zuko randomly coming upon the Avatar while he's in the spirit plane. This raises the obvious question of, how did Zuko know Aang was here, and did he get lucky in finding him? It's such a tacked-on development and contains none of the harshness that sends Zuko over the edge in a climactic way. And crazily enough, his face in the live action is entirely obscured. We don't even get to see the actor's performance in betraying how torn apart he is. He just goes home and collapses with Iroh being dumbfounded as to what happened. Without the context of the animated show, people who are watching this for the first time were probably very confused. Uncle Iroh. Since we're on the subject of Zuko, let's briefly touch on one of my favorite characters from the animated series. Uncle Iroh in the live action is perhaps one of the biggest deviations where he barely resembles his original self. He has none of the joyous, upbeat, humorful energy he should have. He's such a delightful presence in the animated show, and the hidden depth for Iroh as a character is that he's actually containing so much trauma on the inside. His character's strength derives from the fact that that trauma doesn't define him. He overcomes it and makes the world a better place through his wonderful presence. He's already embraced his darkness and sets a goal for the remainder of his life to make the world better, acting as reparations for the past by primarily guiding one of the most influential characters in the show. The live action is almost the opposite, where the trauma is what defines Iroh. It's as if the writers thought bringing all of that nuance to the surface makes him a deeper character. But in reality, it utterly simplifies him, and since he's depressed all the time, it removes what made him such a fan favorite character. I think Iroh as a whole really signifies the tonal shift that the live action show takes. It's much more serious and darker, but since the writing isn't up to par at all, it's basically like a Temu version of Game of Thrones with obvious, more fantastical elements. This overindulgence on being edgy throws the show so far away from the animated version, where that show had a perfect balance of humor and seriousness. It was able to still hit you deeply without compromising the whimsical and fun nature of the show.
Looks like Long Fang is long gone!
Sokka and Katara. I'm going to bundle these two characters together and touch on them quickly since their inherent character flaws go back to Season 1, where Katara as an example contains none of the characteristics of her original counterpart. Sheer compassion, fierceness, and essentially being the mother-like backbone of the team. She just doesn't have that lively energy. Then something that's really annoying is how overpowered the creators make her. But I find it hilarious how it's low-key teased that Katara already has the means of bloodbending by trying to bend the poison out of this kid's arm. That should be something that Katara doesn't even consider at this point. Sokka as well is very muted overall, utterly lacks his fun, confident energy, where he just feels awkward all the time. Then the creators introduce a big change for him where he's still processing the loss of Yue. This is one of the rare good changes because this originally wasn't explored that much. Yue was a very influential character on Sokka, so it makes sense for her loss to still deeply affect him. The only thing is, we do a multi-year time jump in between seasons, so it is kind of questionable for Sokka to not have processed this death already. Whereas in the animated show, there isn't a time jump. You can maybe make an argument that Saga's been suppressing this for years, and it's now only coming back because Suki's returned. However, I don't feel the writers properly explore this. The rest of the characters aren't as problematic. Toph is by far carrying the show.
Woo! Toph, you rule.
Azula marginally grew on me, but more because I came to terms with this being a completely different character. Long Feng gets a lot more screen time, and his manipulation of Aang is deeper. However, all the shenanigans with Azula spikes his intellect back down into a pit of stupidity. It still remains to be a bad decision, including Fire Lord Ozai. Every Fire Nation scene should honestly be cut because it takes away the mystery and suspense as to what they're up to, freeing up screen time for other areas. Suki is good, just kind of crazy that she's able to 1v2 Mei and Ty Lee. Inside the Mechanist is still here, but I like him because Danny Pudi is precious. So yeah, that's me trying to distill down some of the biggest adaptation-related issues, and there's still a lot of minor things wrong with this season, like the checklist writing style of throwing in beloved moments from the animated series and adapting them without it fitting the scene. One example of many being throwing the cactus juice into the Bossing Say party. This show is consistently baffling, and I'm terrified for season 3. Thanks for watching, and my Letterboxd, Discord, and Patreon links are in the description. Have a nice day. As usual, thanks to my top patron, Logan Farmer.